Good evening. Today is the 31st day of December 2015, and we welcome you to another of the explorations in Savitri with our brother Alok. On this eve of the new year, I pray for Mother and Sri Aurobindo to bless and guide and protect all of you. May it be a year of deep peace and joy in them. As always, we read some letters of Sri Aurobindo. These are short, but we've jumped ahead 2 years now. We're in 1938. Sri Aurobindo writes, I have done an enormous amount of work with Savitri. The third section has been recast, not rewritten, so as to give it a more consistent epic swing and amplitude and elevation of level. The fourth section, the worlds, is undergoing transformation. The life part is in a way finished, though I shall have to go over the ground perhaps some 5 or 6 times more to ensure perfection of detail. I am now starting a recasting of the mind part, of which I had only made a sort of basic rough draft. I hope that this time the work will stand as more final and definitive. In the next letter he says, I have been kept too occupied with other things to make much headway with the poem. Except that I have spoiled your beautiful, neat copy of the Worlds under the estrus of the restless urge for more and more perfection. But we are here for world improvement, so I hope that is excusable. Book 2, Canto 3, Book of the Traveler of the Worlds, Canto 3, The Glory and Fall of Life, and we're beginning on page 123.
So it's interesting. We are transiting from 2015 to 2016, and Sri Aurobindo is also taking us as if by leap from the experience of life here and the experience of life on its peaks.
Yes.
So let's hope that we also can leave behind the old consciousness, or let it be transformed by the new, because that's what essentially we are here for. So more and more, if the new can percolate and permeate the old, which is dying and rising to its full swing before it dies,
Yes.
that would be beautiful. And like all moments of transition, it's a painful thing. It's like a snake sloughing off its skin. That's in one of the aphorisms, Sri Aurobindo describes that. And it's the same process that the world is going through. And the more acute it becomes, the nearer we are to the outbreak of the new dawn. So that's the hope and the certitude.
Yes.
So what we read on the previous page was what has become of creation here. And this was the last 3-4 lines. The grand creatrix with her cryptic touch has turned to pathos and power, being self-dream, made a passion play of its fathomless mystery. Now there are worlds which have not fallen, which have not suffered the fall, the diminution. But here we see a mix of the light and the darkness. So what we experience here is largely because of the action of the inconscient. And this is the big challenge for all life upon earth, not only human life. And when we read the description of the other worlds, the worlds which are beautiful, which we'll read now, the worlds of life in their glory and full bloom, then there is a natural attraction in man's heart that why should we labor and struggle and suffer here? Why not find a way towards that and live and dwell forever in that? It's a great attraction. And in old yogas, we know that how yogis aspired to live in some Vaikuntha, Kailash, or any some such place which is so beautiful, full of beatitude, full of harmony, full of wonder, full of love, sweetness. But then yes, it's all right, but this is all right only if we still have traces of ego left in us. But if we really believe that the master of the worlds, our Lord, our beloved, is also here, struggling and suffering with matter and in matter to uplift it, how can we leave this sphere for our own individual personal felicity? And I think that is the aspiration that all of us need to have.
Yes.
Otherwise, the attraction for the beyond, when we read this, is very great.
And in the Judeo-Christian world, heaven,
Yes,
forsaking
everywhere.
earth.
Yes, because, well, it is a beautiful place. But then it is here that He is there, laboring and struggling. And here also we can find the integral Godhead. This is the other part. There are only two places where we can find the integral truth. One is in the superconscient blazing light, or else in matter. All other are typal worlds. So we don't have the integral truth.
Yes.
We have something great, something beautiful, magnificent, and still that totality is missing. That's what we read in the subtle physical. And now we'll read it in the worlds of life lifted to its glory, but here were worlds lifted halfway to heaven. The veil was there, but not the shadowy wall. So there also there is, it's still in the realm of the cosmic ignorance. Sri Aurobindo is not describing the supramental life.
No.
He is describing life reaching its utmost possibility while within this realm. So it reaches that point where there is a very shadowy, a thin veil. So there is a lot of communication from beyond the veil. But here what we experience is a shadowy wall. It's strange, the description is not iron wall, but a shadowy wall. So I was just wondering what a shadowy wall is. And shadowy wall is something which is there, is not there. If there is an iron wall, you can try to break it. But what do you do with a shadowy wall? It's a shadow. The only way is you walk through it and it's a shadow. So shadow can keep on increasing. And there is no limit to it. No term to it. So the only way is to bring light there. There is no other way. So it's a very interesting description. The veil was there in that world, but not the shadowy wall which we experience here. In forms not too remote from human grasp, some passion of the inviolate purity broke through a ray of the original bliss. Again and again we'll see this, that purity and delight, they come together. Beatitude and delight come together. Love and delight come together.
Yes.
And now we have a master line.
Oh, yes.
Heaven's joys might have been earth's if earth were pure. This is the condition. Of course, Mother repeatedly reminds us this purity which is spoken of in yoga is not the moral purity, but something much greater. So very often when it is said that, truth is beyond moral, so people think it's like immoral. But it's not immoral. It's neither amoral. It's something beyond moral, which means she says we have to go beyond morality, but that does not mean we have to do something easy. We have to do something much more difficult. And purity from the divine standpoint is to be open exclusively to the divine and nothing else. So we have this, in the Indian myths it's described very beautifully in the fight between the Asuras and the Devas. So there are the worlds of the gods which are full of splendor and light and harmony and music and beatitude, all that is there. And there are worlds of darkness, the demonic worlds, full of ambition, jealousy, hatred, fear, suspicion, will to possess, etc. Now, the Asura always wants to enter these worlds and wrest them by force. He wants the heaven to come down by force, but it's not allowed. The only way you can enter into these worlds, become its citizen, is by cultivating purity. So that's why repeatedly it's through tapasya that you can enter into these worlds. You can't just by power, by force. So every time humanity has tried to create something of that heaven upon earth, dream destination America. So
Yes.
Europe. See what happens. What happens is, because man carries within his heart something of that image, so he wants to create that world. He wants to create it by the material means that are available. Lanka of old, Atlantis, Mayan civilization. So you can create a external structure. But because the consciousness remains the same, impure, egoistic, desire-ridden, it's bound to collapse under its own weight.
Even though they were more advanced technologically.
Pretty advanced, very advanced. And Sri Aurobindo has confirmed that a civilization like that of Atlantis did exist. So it's not just Plato's imagination, it's a seer vision.
Yes.
And now, of course, they've explored and found that probably, it was there. Look at Lanka. It's supposed to be, every house top was filled with gold. So, if we try to create a heaven upon earth without the inner change, he's speaking here of that inner change, which is purification, and other things also he'll describe. It will invariably collapse. It's foredoomed to failure, because man will end up, if nothing else, the same struggle, fight, competition, if nothing else, boredom, leading to drugs and other things, because you have money, you have no struggle, and there is boredom, so you'll go into channels and end up collapsing. And this is the lesson of history.
And throughout Savitri, Sri Aurobindo reminds us not to take the way of the Titan.
Yes, throughout Savitri. Because that road of trying to create a heaven is dangerous. So many times when people, worry about India, so I personally feel it's good that, things don't get easily done in India. Because if it happens very easily, we'll have another illusory world where everything is very nice, but there's no inner change. So it has to be only through inner change and through the power of tapas. And so it's a long journey through which one has to pass through. So that's why he gives us one beautiful clue. Heaven's joys might have been earth's if earth were pure. So every time we complain to heaven or the divine or whatever, someone has to be there to complain about our condition here. Well, these conditions will change, provided we change within. It's not that if conditions change outside, then we will change inside. It's the other way around. There could have reached our divinized sense and heart. Not the human sense and heart cannot find an access there. Like Trishanku, it will hang in between. So Trishanku, by the power of Vishwamitra's tapasya, is sent up to the gates of heaven, but is not allowed entry. He says, you have to change inside. So it's not somebody's tapasya which will take us there. That tapasya has to transform us, which is what the mother is doing by her tapasya, transforming our nature so that we can become fit inhabitants. There could have reached our divinized sense and heart some natural felicities, bright extreme, some thrill of supernatures, absolutes. All strengths could laugh and sport on earth's hard roads. Even here that could be established if there is purity. And never feel her cruel edge of pain. All love could play and nowhere nature's shame. It's as a child I used to always wonder, and I'm sure it's so strange that of all things, human beings almost instinctively associate love with shame. It's so strange. Somehow or the other. At least in the Indian context, this was true.
I see.
Yes. I'm sure many people would connect with it that,
No.
Motherly love, no, but if there was love between two human beings, all kinds of things, it's something, at some point it was very strange that you could be married and everybody knows you are married, but you are not supposed to hold the hand of your wife inside the living room. Right? It's like, not done, just not done. It's an expression of love, but you're not supposed to do that. So, this sense of shame being associated with love, as if love is something very dark, something fallen. Now, it's very nice that people can, celebrate. Of course, maternal love, paternal love is another thing, but love in all its intensity. And that's why we have so many, even world over, tragedies associated with the theme of love. Take Hamlet, take Romeo and Juliet, take Laila Majnu, take Shiri Farhad. They are all associated with tragedy, as if the whole world conspires against this energy. Now, what is needed is to purify it. But instead of purification, it is as if something shameful. So here Sri Aurobindo takes a very beautiful, it's a very gentle irony. All love could play. Because there is purity. So if love could be refined and purified, if this energy could be uplifted, there is nothing, there is no question of shame with love. It's because it's degraded into something very dark, something which is nothing but a play of passion, dark passions and possessiveness, that it gets associated with shame. So, he is reminding us that all love could play and nowhere nature shame. Things have changed now and things are changing, which is very good.
But these next two lines are so...
But she has stabled her dreams in matter's courts. But what is the problem? Why this purity is so difficult? Because matter turns in habitual grooves. It doesn't accept the divine influence. The mind and heart, yes, they will accept it. Even certain parts of life can accept the divine influence. But matter, whatever groove matter has set going, it carries on with that groove. That's the problem with the biological animal inheritance. That we end up behaving like little animals. Well, worse than that. For animals, it's very natural. But because matter doesn't easily accept, and life has taken it as a challenge that I am going to do it here. Stabled her dreams.
Stabled her dreams.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh.
In matter's courts. Yeah. We are going to establish here. That is the difficult part, the challenge. Savitri itself is that challenge.
Yes.
She is offered that, okay, you want immortal love? Ascend to a greater heaven. You will be granted it. Don't ask on earth because love does not exist here. That's what death tells Savitri. It is just an aberration, a gland, a hormonal something, but there is nothing like love on earth. It's a craving of the flesh. And Savitri says, my heart is purified. It's not a craving of the heart. It's not a cry of emotions, but something deeper. But death doesn't believe.
No.
Says on earth it doesn't exist. Elsewhere it's possible. So because of matter and its hard grip, whatever enters matter, it turns into something very rigid. Inconscience is very active there. It is its domain.
Oh. And when death says to her, know also,
Yes.
and knowing thou shalt cease to live and cease to love, delivered from thy heart.
But she says something else. When I have loved all, then
Forever.
I shall know. Forever.
When
then
I have
shall
loved
know.
forever, I shall know.
In fact, there is a very interesting story that comes to my mind, since we are at this theme. It is the story of Usha and Anirudh in Indian thought. And Sri Aurobindo has written about it. And it is believed that Sri Aurobindo himself, or a portion of it, had incarnated in Anirudh. And Usha Mrilanli Devi's past life, his wife in this life, was Princess Usha. Now, this story is very interesting because Anirudh himself, when Shiva destroys Kama, vital love, passionate love, so he becomes impersonal and spreads into the universe, Anang, without a body. But then his wife cries. He says, well, he is destroyed. He has become impersonal, universal. What about me? I am still a very individualized person. So I am going to burn myself. He says, wait, after many, decades, generations, when the cycle turns in Krishna's time, Kamadev will be born as Anirudh, as Krishna's grandson, and you shall be born as Princess Usha. Now, the whole story is so symbolic. Usha is the dawn, and where is she born? She is born in the demon king's Banasur's palace. And he's an impossible demon. You just can't kill him. He has, like all demons, he has all the possible boons. Shiva himself safeguards his palace. And he's totally against, this kind of a love, and he doesn't believe. He says, I'm going to decide whom you get married to. I know what is best for you. And she revolts. And, it's a very dramatic story where Anirudh, in fact, Sri Aurobindo has written a whole narrative on the abduction of Princess Usha. Because, she is abducted and then there is a fight. Eventually, Banasur dies. It's a very symbolic story of what happens to the power of love. And of course, Usha is the dawn. In the demonic kingdom, she brings a new light. And with that light flows sweetness and love and beauty. So this is what we, in a story form is there. But she has stabled her dreams in matter's courts, and still her doors are barred to things supreme. Of course, we can say now the doors are open.
Yes. Yes.
It's a great thing. But when Sri Aurobindo is writing Savitri, but still her doors are barred to things supreme. So we should remember that certain letters also that Sri Aurobindo has written, they are written at a point of time when the supermind was a possibility but had not yet manifested.
Right.
So when he says that still the doors are barred to things supreme, is at a point of time when he was pulling the supermind but it had not yet manifested. So let's hope and
But
trust.
it's only Canto 3.
Yes, only Canto 3. These worlds could feel God's breath visiting their tops. Now he is taking us from matter to those worlds where you could feel at least the breath of the Lord. Some glimmer of the transcendence hymn was there.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes, across the white aeonic silences, immortal figures of embodied joy traversed wide spaces near to eternity's sleep. So they have just emerged from the superconscient. So they still feel the breath of God, like a little baby feels the mother's very close contact. So instinctively they could feel the breath of God. Pure, mystic voices in beatitude's hush appealed to love's immaculate sweetnesses, calling his honey touch to thrill the worlds, his blissful hands to seize on nature's limbs. So even now we see this. All creation is essentially an act of love. There would be no creation without it. No outflowering, no blossoming. That's the energy which has gone into creation. But look at, those heights. His blissful hands to seize on nature's limbs. His is, of course, love. His sweet, intolerant might of union. At another place, Sri Aurobindo says, this is the most difficult Godhead, the burning test of the Godhead in our parts.
Yes.
He says that she could harbor his sublimer breath when Sri Aurobindo speaks of Savitri.
Book 1, Canto 2.
Book 1, Canto 2.
Yes.
In her, he met his own eternity. So he says love is a very exacting energy. It doesn't stop unless there is the completest possible union. So intolerant. So it is intolerant of anything less than that. So that is why this is the greatest power to unite with the divine. Because when we love the divine, ultimately no barrier will remain. Or for that matter, any object. If we love a material object, we get so identified with it, like the King Midas. So love is an energy which is so powerful that wherever we turn it, it will not stop halfway. It will take us right either down the slope or up the heavens till there is the perfect union. So look at this line, intolerant. His sweet, it says sweet intolerance. His sweet, intolerant might of union. What a combination of words. Sweet. How can sweetness be intolerant? And how can sweetness be might? We often associate these as contrary emotions. You are either sweet and soft or strong and hard.
Intolerant.
Intolerant. You can't be both. But See, there it is. To take all beings into his savior arms. It doesn't, that energy there had taken everything into its arms. That's the power of love, the being of love. Drawing to his pity the rebel and the waif. So it's love at its extreme. It's not like I love some people because they are dear to me, they are my relatives, they are close to me, my ego takes personal interest in them. It doesn't stop. Even the rebel and the waif it loves. That is the power of this love in those heights. Now our love is very, confined to few persons with whom my ego takes preferential interest. So it is again stable in matter's court. So those who are linked to my physical life. That's why in yoga, at one point somebody asked Sri Aurobindo, I no more feel the same attachment for my family as I used to feel earlier. So the person felt very bad. In the Indian context is regarded as something not good. So he asked Sri Aurobindo that I am feeling like that. Is it right? He says, on the contrary, it's a liberation. Because family attachments are tamasic in origin. They are based on basically physical consciousness. Because we are born in a certain family, physically associated with certain people, therefore we are naturally attached and we mistake this attachment for love. Love is not attachment, but that's how we mistake it. We don't know any other love.
Yes. And even Christ has said, if you have to leave family, home, wife to follow me.
Yes.
Yes.
The mother,
Very clear.
the duty towards the divine transcends everything.
Yes.
All other duties,
Yes.
duty towards family, this, that. Even Mirabai, when she left her home, this was her question also. That am I doing the right thing? And then she asked Tulsidas of Ramayana, am I doing the right thing? Leaving my husband, leaving my family, leaving my in-laws in search of my ever elusive Krishna? And Tulsidas gave a beautiful reply. I'll just say a couple of lines in Hindi. Jaake priyena Ram Vaidehi, so chhadiye koti bairi sam jaddapi param sanehi. He says, his beloved are Ram and Sita. Ram Vaidehi. He says, I have followed this rule that whoever loves the Lord, I am his. And whoever doesn't love the Lord, I have nothing to do with him. Jaake priyena Ram Vaidehi, so chhadiye koti barisam. He is almost like an enemy. You have to leave aside and follow that path. And then he gives number of examples that how Bharat left his own mother. So we have this power of love which takes all. To force on them the happiness they refuse. Look at, what a wonderful line this is. Love is the power that forces happiness. There is a very interesting story of mother with Huta.
Yes.
So when Huta came and one of the days she was in one of her moods when she decided to pack up everything, and as she would try to pack up, she went to Golkund and said that I am going to go away, and she decided to pack up everything.
Yes.
So in fact the story goes that when she had gone to mother had given her some white roses.
Yes.
And Huta had thrown them one time. We can do that.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. So Huta, she went to mother and mother gave her some white flowers and she threw it back. She said, I don't love you. You don't love me. I am going. She came and started packing her bags in Golkund. And then before she could leave, Vasudha-ben comes with the letter of mother to her and says, card of mother.
Yeah.
Says, you know what mother told me? Said, what did mother tell you? She must have told that she's a horrible girl who behaves like this. Because obviously she had begun to feel that I have done something I shouldn't have done and mother would be angry. She says, mother said, this girl doesn't know how much love she has in her heart for me. And she unpacks everything and stays back. The happiness they refuse. So there are beings who refuse the happiness that will come from the embrace of the divine. And yet, in those worlds, divine can force it. Here it's difficult because we are all surrounded, we go into a whole of matter. And if the divine were to act with that intolerant might, he will shatter all limits.
Yes.
There would be no more a body, no more an earth. Again, Mother's message that this wonderful world of delight waiting at our gates for our call to come.
Yes.
In the worlds, higher worlds, she comes. But here she is not able to come. So someone asked that, why, Mother? She said, it's so powerful that you have to be, she has used the word super Parsifal. Complete freedom from any attraction towards pleasure. That purity. Then she will come. So the disciple asked, Mother, why doesn't she force herself? She says, force herself. You will vanish.
Yeah.
This world will dissolve. My child, one drop of love and you go crazy.
And that line, an answering touch
Might shatter
all measures made.
Exactly. But there, because there is this plasticity and wideness, one can feel the breath of God. That's why again we started with that purity and then love. Because first that must be established. Without that purity, other things cannot have a play. A chant hymeneal to the unseen divine. Chant of marriage, union, being lifted from these worlds to the divine. A flaming rhapsody of white desire. So there is something called pure desire. And there is a very cryptic line in the Gita, which many people have interpreted in many ways. So there is a desire called, which is in accordance with dharma. Now, on one side, Sri Krishna keeps telling that you have to get rid of desire. On the other side, he says that I am the desire which is in tune with dharma. Yes. What can be a desire which could be a desire and yet in tune with dharma? Here we have white desire. Yeah. A desire which is Savitri's desire for Satyavan. If we use the word, I want him. I want him for this work. White desire. What lines, what combinations. Lured an immortal music into the heart and woke the slumbering ear of ecstasy. A purer, fierier sense had there its home, not our dull senses. Actually, our senses are very, very dull, and we make them still dull by all the loudness, the harshness, even our own words which are so harsh. By all that we make the senses dull, by sights which are very crude. So they have to be refined and purified. Even the taste, everything has become very hard and harsh and dull. Already it is dull because of the material envelope. But there the senses are like pure channels of delight. They are meant for that. A burning urge no earthly limbs can hold. One drew a large, unburdened, spacious breath. Unburdened. Again, wonderful adjective. And the heart sped from beat to rapturous beat. The voice of time sang of the immortal's joy. Beat to rapturous beat. One way that Sri Aurobindo describes the new creation, he says, there will be evolution and progress there also, but it will be from joy to point of joy, freedom to freedom, bliss to bliss. Not as of now from ignorance to knowledge, from suffering to joy. So that will go away. An inspiration and a lyric cry. The moments came with ecstasy on their wings. We dread the moments. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We may be very happy. We are scared of too much happiness, full of apprehension, because matter has been molded under suffering. So it anticipates problems first, difficulties first, because that's how it has evolved. But the beings there don't know. That's why many of the beings who come from those realms don't understand. That's why when it is said that, the word impossible is in the dictionary of fools. Napoleon could say that because, He came from another realm where there was nothing impossible. But for his followers, it was so difficult. Yet he could inspire them because, from those realms, you carry something of that fire and that breath. But here, matter doesn't. Matter expects, anticipates problems, pain. But there, the moments come on wings of ecstasy.
And he says in another passage about the high gods choose today's impossibles for the future's base.
Yes.
Yes.
The moments came with ecstasy on their wings. So one looks forward to time. Beauty unimaginable moved heaven bare, absolved from boundaries in the vasts of dreams. So it's a dream world in the sense that dream in the sense of the Upanishadic and the Vedic imagery, that the waking world which is concretely rooted in matter, and the subtle worlds. The cry of the birds of wonder called from the skies to the deathless people of the shores of light. These are the great gods, and they don't die, they are immortal. So when their term comes to an end, they are absorbed back into the Supreme and put forth. That's why they don't understand why we cry on death, because they don't know this.
Amal asked Sri Aurobindo about these various birds.
Yes.
He said, you can't explain them, you have to see them and experience them.
Birds of wonder. Creation leaped straight from the hands of God. It's like a baby still feeling the mother's touch. Here we feel orphaned. That's the word he has used. As if we are orphaned from the divine. Where is he? Where is he? But there it feels still that touch, leaped straight from the hands of God. Marvel and rapture wandered in the ways. Only to be was a supreme delight. You don't have to do something. You don't have to get something to be happy. Just to be is to be simply happy. That's the work Mother gave to Dara. Mother, what work shall I do? Be happy. 3 days later, Mother, very difficult. Give me some simpler work. How to be happy? Just be happy. What are you doing? Nothing particular. Are you doing this job, that job? No, nothing. Are you getting this much salary? No. Are you happy? Yes, I am happy. Just to be, I am happy. Just being is happy.
And to jump a cloud.
Yes.
Be simple.
Be simple.
Be happy.
Be happy. Only to be was a supreme delight. Life was a happy laughter of the soul, and joy was king with love for minister.
Oh, what a line.
What a line. Joy was king with love for minister. The spirit's luminousness was bodied there. Life's contraries were lovers or natural friends, and our extremes keen edges of harmony. Look at it, what marvelous way to put it. Life's contraries. Here also, divine brings contraries together, but they become cause of pain. There, when contraries, they enrich each other. So they become keen edges that create harmony. It's like, a good painter uses contrasts to create a beautiful picture. But on earthly life, whenever the divine brings contrast together, it ends up because of the strong ego sense. Actually, contrasts are meant to enrich each other. And that is a higher harmony. That's why in one of the places, Mother says, the old way was that the ego's authority. Now, the very same material which is revolting, you have to create a harmony with that. You cannot exclude it.
Yes.
You have to take it, accept it, and create a higher harmony, because that has also come to enrich us.
And she says that some of those things that are so negative to you
Yes.
may be in you.
In you. That's it. So, life's contraries were lovers or natural friends. Even here, something of that happens, that human beings are drawn towards something which is the opposite. The original impulse to creation is soul plunged into the adventure of the darkness. It was living in a sphere of light. So something of that does take place here. Indulgence with a tender purity came. Again, see, indulgence is normally with laxity. Those who are indulgent are very lax. So it's okay, do whatever you want to. But here there is indulgence with purity. And the only example I can think of is Divine Mother. That, she is so indulgent. I mean, I have heard such stories. 3-4 of them. One is that, Laiddi, you must be knowing, Laiddi Desiree home, she used to live there. So Laiddi would work in the mother's place in the room, and she had an adopted child who is now grown up, and he himself was telling me that, she couldn't leave him. So she would bring the child, and the child would be playing outside, and she would be inside, and after that time she will come out, and with the child she'll go. Then one day something happened and the mother came to know. She said, why have you left him outside? You bring him in. Mother, he'll disturb you. Doesn't matter. Bring him in. So this child went inside. So when he was leaving, mother gave him a bag full of chocolates. Then he took it very happy that, she was feeling, he said, I had a different impression. No, you stay out. All that. Now he said, what a mother. She is indulging with such branded chocolates, So many people would give mother all kinds of chocolates and in a very beautiful bag. And then as he's about to go, he says, wait. Yes, mother. Don't eat alone, share it with everyone. First thing. Second thing, keep the wrappers carefully. Don't just throw them on the floor. Third is, bring the bag tomorrow so that I can give it a refill. He says, in one go, indulging with me, she taught me 3 lessons of life. Don't eat it alone. Share it with everybody. Don't think that, okay, chocolate is important, wrapper can be thrown. There has to be a place for that. Maybe the waste bin or whatever to it. And keep the bag carefully. You bring it, I'll refill it again. It says, for days, mother would keep giving me the chocolates. Indulgence with a tender purity. Look at the combination. There is indulgence. Whoever heard of divine giving chocolates? There is also purity. It's not like, okay, you take the chocolates and enjoy. And there is tenderness. Yes. Tenderness towards everything. So,
remember Kaki?
Yes.
Mother didn't see many people. She only had her secretaries at a certain time. This little boy could go up to her at any time, enter her room, show her his bruise, and mother would look at it carefully.
Where the father is behind calling him and he's rushing to mother. Yeah. Even these people, all the 3 now, okay, let me not name, but they used to play Ringa Ringa Roses with the mother. Yes. Mother would play Ringa Ringa Roses with them, 15-16-year-old girls. And they would, in the afternoon, what do? So they would, what is now the meditation room where mother's last darshan everyone had. So naturally children, they would, afternoon they are playing, making noise, whatever. And so this lady was telling me, not even ever, people used to tell us, mother will get disturbed and she will, but never it happened. Only once mother came. And she said, you can play, but just, Pavitra is resting. That is when during his, malignancy days, Pavitra is resting. He sometimes get disturbed. So just, be a little quiet. I mean, she says that for years we have played. And once that too because of Pavitra. What a kind of indulgent mother. Can we imagine that, they were playing inside the ashram like that? And she would just... take it in a very different way. So indulgent. She is a very indulgent mother. That part is for sure. I'm sure everybody knows it. Now, other lines also. And nursed the God on her maternal breast. There none was weak, so falsehood could not live. All falsehood is because of weakness. In one stroke. Again we see the purity, strength, sweetness. Nothing wrong with these things. But when we are weak, when we are sentimentally weak, then love takes a very vicious, dark form. Possessiveness, fear of losing, all this result of weakness. Violence is because of weakness in the vital. People are very violent because of a weakness in the vital. These are mother's guidance. So if you make the vitals strong, anger and violence will automatically come down. This is one of the simple offshoots of that. So there was nobody was weak. There was no need to be false, to put up a facade, to deceive. So there none was weak, so falsehood could not live. Ignorance was a thin shade protecting light. Too much light, so beings will dissolve, so it like a thin shade. Enhancing the beauty like a lamp shade, very gentle lamp shade. Imagination, the free will of truth. Whatever those beings imagined was in tune with truth. Not, there is something called as truth imagination. Sri Aurobindo speaks of that the supramental creation, the supramental beings will have truth imagination. Right now our imagination is morbid, or simply fantastic, fanciful. But there is an imagination which is in tune with truth, because imagination is the same power with which God creates the world. So what is called as Maya in Indian thought in human beings becomes imagination. All the faculties of human beings are a distortion or a reflection of an original power. So imagination is the power of Maya. In fact, if we look at this universe, we can say the divine has imagined it. But because the divine has imagined it, therefore it is real and true in its own way. Pleasure a candidate for heaven's fire. We had heard that pleasure is bad, because all these senses were conduits of delight. Pleasure was a candidate of heaven's fire. So when Dilip Kumar Roy came here, he found, he was, I have to do yoga is this, that. But, he was invited for a cup of tea where he also had rasagullas. So he said, if rasgulla and tea is allowed, I can stay here. And then Sri Aurobindo's famous letter to him, that it is no part of my yoga to suppress the senses. Some people think it's a sign of yoga that you mix bitter gourd and chocolate and everything you eat together. Oh, he's a great yogi. That's crudeness. That's dullness. Your tastes have to be refined, but you don't have to be slave of it. You have to be master of all these energies. It should be refined. You should know the difference. Mother could tell the difference between things which have been made in one place and another, and she would say, this is made like this there. I mean, it's amazing. Some points in agenda, you just marvel. This tastes like the way they make it in this particular place. After so many decades of living in India, she still had such a refined. And here she's talking of just the material taste. And yet she could take anything without a fuss. So, like a master. So pleasure was there because it's purified. It's not the master of the beings, but it's a slave to the beings. So it could be a candidate and be there. The intellect was beauty's worshipper. Here we worship the intellect. Beauty has no place except being a slave. Here the intellect was beauty's worshipper. Strength was the slave of calm spiritual law. This is the difference between the Titans and when we see Shiva. Shiva is mighty, but he is so calm that almost deceptive. The Titans think, we can easily fool him, we can easily cheat him, we can easily defeat him because he is so calm and quiet. Even Duryodhana made this mistake. Krishna, that flute player, let him be with Arjuna. Anyways, he's not going to lift anything, not a weapon. I want his army strong. So, he doesn't know. Krishna unarmed is capable of decimating a whole army. So there, the strength is under the sway of calm spiritual law. Sri Aurobindo. Yes. We see that calm strength inside him. Power, yes, just a few lines and then we will stop. Power laid its head upon the breasts of bliss. It was not harsh, cruel, but full of ananda, delight of being. So we just read these last 4 lines and then we will stop, because after that a new movement starts. There none was weak, so falsehood could not live. Ignorance was a thin shade protecting light. Imagination, the free will of truth. Pleasure, a candidate for heaven's fire. The intellect was beauty's worshipper. Strength was the slave of calm spiritual law. Power laid its head upon the breasts of bliss.
A very happy
Bonani,
New Year to
yes.
you all.
Bonani to all
Bonne
of
année.
us.